Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the New Media Show. My name is Todd Cochran. I'm the host here, and we've got a great discussion today with Michael Wolf from newmarket.co and also a contributor over at Forbes. We talk about
Next Market.
Next Market. Sorry. Yeah,
Hey, no
Next
problem.
Market. I'm so
It's early in the morning.
it is in the morning. So Next Market. I know I've got it right in the lower third. And of course, our great co-host, Rob Greenlee. Rob, good morning. How are you?
Doing fine, Todd. Great to be here. It's exciting to have Michael here to talk about his podcast project, and I'm definitely looking forward to diving into it a little bit here this morning and talking about it.
Yeah, I am too. And I was a couple weeks ago when his article came out on Forbes. Got a lot of traction. We look forward to talking about that too. So, Michael, for those that don't know you, why don't you give everyone like the 60-second bio and background?
Yeah, my elevator pitch. I should have practiced it. And so I'm a analyst, blogger, and I spent the last 4 years at a tech blog called GigaOM, helping them set up their research group. And I decided to go out on my own to set up my own research company. And at the same time, I decided to also start a podcast. So being a curious analyst who's always followed digital media for the last decade, I decided, well, let me dig into this podcast market a little bit. And so I did, and I talked to some of the biggies out there. And Rob was very helpful in that. So I'll give a shout out to Rob Greenlee. But yeah, so that's really my background.
And I must mention, if I bring your website up here, I noticed that you actually had a piece put up yesterday with Rob in it. So it looks like a little interview with Rob. I'm definitely going to get subscribed to your podcast, so to check out what you guys are saying. So it sounds like some cool topics on the show. So, well, Rob, since you invited Michael, I think I'll just let you kind of lead off here this morning with some questions. Where did you kind of want to go this morning in talking with Michael?
Well, I think I just wanted to. I think he's been moving down this podcast project path and the article for a few weeks now, and I thought maybe it would be fun to get some feedback from him about what he's learned. And he's talked to some really, really important people in the podcasting space here as part of this project. And I think he can probably summarize it pretty well, I think, of where we are today and what the perceptions are and what the opportunities might be in the future. And I think, and also I'd like to hear from him what he thinks about it really, really going forward as far as his own podcast. And then, so no pressure here, Michael, but go ahead and start off, and kind of give us kind of a 30,000 foot view of what you've learned here over the last, probably month and a half that you've been traveling down this path around podcasting.
Yeah. So, I decided to kind of explore this hypothesis that I developed after talking to a CEO of a kind of a sexy new media company called Vox Media, Jim Bankoff, and because I had been listening to some of the Vox Media podcasts. They have they have blogs like The Verge, for example, and I asked him where podcasts sit in the bigger framework of his company. He didn't really necessarily see that blogs were a core product, or excuse me, not blogs, but he didn't necessarily see that podcasts were necessarily a core product that he could monetize to the same degree as blogs with page views and also their video. So it made me started to think, I had started to think that podcasts were coming out of the media ghetto. I had seen guys like Corolla start a company. I'd seen Mark Maron really kind of get write-ups in the New York Times, and guys like Jesse Thorne, and all these guys are just getting such traction. And I thought, well, there's a kind of a disconnect here between the thinking around podcasting and what I'm actually seeing in the market. So I wanted to explore that. So I felt the best way to do that was to really just jump in and talk to some folks, and ultimately the end goal would be to write up a post or blog post for Forbes. But I also thought I can take some of these articles and stitch them together, or some of these podcasts and stitch them together into kind of an audio book version or a podcast version of the conversation. So with that context, what I found is talking to guys like Ira Glass and talking to guys like Stephen Dubner, and also talking to guys like Rob, who works behind the scenes and also has his podcast, Rob Wall from Libsyn. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
I saw a little pop up there. I found that, the market really is maturing in terms of there are businesses being built around podcasts, and people are really starting to take serious how to monetize. Todd, very well, you developed a business based on advertising that you can really kind of talk about a little bit, I'm sure. So I think that this market is starting to find some of the same elements that you're seeing within other more mature media markets. But what I think what's happened is, you saw this initial wave of interest in podcasting from around 2004 to 2007, a lot of hype. And then it seems like it plateaued a little bit, and kind of the perspective and the feeling about podcasts was, it's to use Rob's words, amateur hour. Because there was a lot of people doing podcasts, and it was kind of like, same thing with, a lot of people putting up blogs, and people felt like, well, I heard this more probably from 3 or 4 guys. The feeling is podcasting is 2 guys in their basement talking about Star Wars. I mean, I heard that like 3 or 4 times from guys like Stephen Dubner and Dan Benjamin. So there was this first wave of the podcast, and, it kind of plateaued. And then you started to have guys come in around, I think, 2007, 2008, 2009, who really started to kind of take it to the next level. There's always guys like Leo Laporte, who was really taking it seriously. Leo's kind of definitely one of the founding fathers there. But you had guys like Dan Benjamin come in. And then, as I wrote this article, you'll see if you read it on Forbes, the title of the article is Funny Men and iPhones. What I saw in 2009 was this just a huge wave of comedians. And, I think that when I was listening, I think because I was an Adam Carolla fan of his terrestrial radio show, and he talked about when he got canceled, and within a day or within the next day or two, he said he's going to create a podcast. And I thought at the time, I go, that might change things for podcasts, because I've been a fan of Carolla since Loveline, since The Man Show. I thought, well, he's got a big following, and if he goes on the podcast, I think a huge percentage of those people are going to follow him, and they did. And so I think Carolla going to create a podcast really kind of started to raise the awareness. And I think, Rob, when in our conversation, and those of you listen to Rob's and I's conversation that I put up yesterday, Carolla going to podcasts raised the awareness of podcasting in Hollywood. And it may not have happened like that day, but I think what happened over the next year or two is Hollywood got interested in podcasting, and it started to, I think, be reinforced as you saw a huge number of comedians over the next 2 years start to jump on the podcast bandwagon. So you have, even Adam Carolla, or not Adam, but Ira Glass, when I talked to him, said, he goes, every comedian in the world has a podcast now. But more seriously, there's a lot of comedians who do podcasts, and there's podcast networks like Earwolf that have been built. So I think the market's really matured. There's been a couple waves. The content on podcasting that from talking to people has really gotten more mainstream, because initially it was very tech centric, and Todd, you've been here and you have a huge audience that love tech, but there's also a lot of people who maybe don't necessarily want to get in the nitty gritty on tech. So they want to hear comedians. Yep. They want to hear things like, hear about lifestyle, hear about diet, paleo diet. So, that type of content really has broadened the audience, and tech people always going to be there. And now comedy fans are always going to be there. And then I think it's just going to get wider and wider in terms of the menu of options you can choose from a content perspective for podcasts. I've been rambling, so I'll take a breath and
No, this is good. And, I think, it's interesting where the space, from my perspective, has come. And, Rob and I have talked about it a lot, and we're going to produce a big piece next week. I think we're going to release it on Tuesday. We've been working on it for a little while, really about, we're basically got all this great data, and really that's kind of what we've turned into, not only an advertising company, but all this data. And we're going to start pushing out some of these data pieces and show you the, top-down view. And I think what we're going to release is think we have 69 million listener user set that we're using. 69.7, I think, was the number came up with. And so they give us a pretty good idea of how they're listening, where they're listening. And I think that's important in the space because, that has changed dramatically since, this thing kicked off, AKA in 2004, and people could, magically sync the media to their mobile device. And, people aren't necessarily listening that way or watching that way anymore. So we're kind of excited to put that out next week as kind of a little, I guess, a little pitch. We'll be putting that out. But the space hasn't gotten, I don't think, any easier from our perspective for content creators like Adam and others to keep this thing going as a business too. So I'm sure those guys talk to you at length about the challenges with bringing on advertisers and stuff. And I'm kind of, I'd like to hear it from you on what they said to you. What do you feel that's been their biggest challenges in overcoming, dealing with media buyers?
Yeah. I think that, so I went into it with the perspective that, maybe podcasting needs to graduate to tier 1 blue chip advertisers. And I think maybe that was the wrong perspective, because as I talk to podcasters, more and more and across, public radio, but also, the comedy podcast networks. I just talked to Jeff, the CEO over at Earwolf, which was a great conversation. And that gave me some perspective as well. There are some really good advertisers that love podcasting, and they may really kind of feel like there's strong affinity with the types of topics they want, the types of audience they want, who are embracing certain topics like tech, that are embracing certain topics like comedy or lifestyle. And you may never necessarily get like Coca-Cola or Pizza Hut or whatever jumping on the podcast bandwagon, because quite honestly, this isn't a Super Bowl. This isn't an audience of 100 million watching simultaneously with every single demographic type. But what you see is certain advertisers love this medium. And, we've heard a lot, I listen and I hear guys like Squarespace and GoToMeeting and whatever. And a lot of these guys that continue to advertise, obviously there's a great return there, or they wouldn't be coming back. So I think what you'll probably see over time is, as the audience continues to grow, is maybe more blue chip advertisers. You may get more Fords and Chevys, and you may get more Coca-Colas and Pizza Huts. But I think what you're going to find is, as data like you're releasing, Todd, as there gets more data into the marketplace and awareness in brand and advertising agencies go up, I think you're going to see more people want to incorporate podcast advertising into a broader campaign. So, because I think there is strong audience and hugely engaged audiences there, right? I mean, people subscribe to podcasts. It's a complete opt-in experience. It's not a passive experience. You're not driving in a car and being annoyed by the loud DJ. People are turning in to be annoyed by us, right? They've decided to spend their Saturday morning to be annoyed by us because at some level or actually enjoy listening to us. So it's a complete opt-in experience. So I think there's a higher value per listener than a very passive listening experience. And I think over time, advertisers and agencies are going to understand that. And I don't know if I answered your question perfectly.
No. That's a great high-end overview, and I think you and I are completely in agreement with, I'm in agreement at least with your assessment on where things are in the space. And, as far as the content goes, it excites me to see, these comedy networks and, all this other content coming to light. And, some of the content really kind of takes a back seat because people don't realize that it's out there. So the discovery mechanisms aren't super great in some categories, but I'm always amazed when, I start digging through the data, and boy, I tell you, sometimes it can be a little overwhelming. And I say, what is that? And I go and I look at a show, and it's on a specific topic that's very bizarre, and there's 200,000 people listening to it. And I'm like, how's that possible? And then, you think about it, and that guy may be one of 25 or 30 shows that are serving that market, and he's the one that's kind of broke out. And you just sit back and you're astonished. So I think, from that perspective, the audiences may not be as big as a network television, but I'm going to tell you, they're big from a from a major media market. You talk about Seattle. If someone if someone said there was 200,000 people listening to a radio program in Seattle, they would no doubt be their number one in their market, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I talked to Stephen Dumner of Freakonomics Radio, and he said it might be a niche, but he had a great quote. It might be a niche, but it's a damn big niche.
Yeah.
And but to kind of more specifically, talking about another guy I talked to, Dan Benjamin, who runs the great 5x5 network. One of the things he said is, if you're talking, when I was asking him, will I ever get my wife, for example, to listen to podcasts, because she's not a tech person. She doesn't necessarily like get nerdy about comedy. Like, I like comedy because I'm a comedy nerd. I said, will she ever listen to it? And he said, when you have that conversation with her about that topic that she loves, that she thought no one ever wrote about or talked about, like, maybe paleo diet or whatever weird topic you're into. And once she discovers there's a podcast out there that covers that topic, and ultimately I think over time there is, that person will get into the podcast. And so I think there's what podcasting is not unlike other democratized media forms. So, I followed the ebook market, and I followed, online video. And what I think what's happening here is with digital media, you basically remove the barriers to entry, because there's the low cost production tools. There's low cost distribution. And so when I watch, Amanda Hawking or some author write a book, put it up on Amazon, and somehow she gets discovered by a tastemaker and he tweets about it, or they write a blog about it, and all of a sudden she's selling 1 million copies on Amazon. That's not unlike what I think you can see ultimately with podcasting, right? I think a lot of these podcasters start a podcast. They may start with like an audience of their wife and their dog, and then over time they just get discovered, and it's because they're have a deep knowledge of a topic that maybe no one in their neighborhood cares about, or no one in their immediate circle cares about. And that's why they started a podcast, because they wanted to talk to the microphone, because no one else is listening. But then they find, across the country, there's someone who really cares about the same topic. And so I think that because it's so easy to start a podcast, because it's so low cost, you can buy a mic, you have a computer, you can get it up on, Libsyn, or you can get it up on Blueberry, your podcast hosting network, get it up on, SoundCloud. It doesn't cost a lot of money to do it. And once you do that and you start to get the name out there, I think ultimately, I don't want to sound too hackneyed. I mean, cream does rise to the top ultimately, it seems like a lot of times, and people will discover it, but I think you have to persevere. And I don't know, maybe I'm veering into podcast tips. You guys should be giving the podcast tips, not me. But I think ultimately podcasting is great because it's low cost. You can talk about topics that maybe no one cares about of your circle of friends, but you will find people that want to listen to it. And I think that's what's happening, and people are really kind of embracing that.
Well, I'm glad you brought the tip back up, because I tell you, sometimes I get tired of hammering it home. Oftentimes I get an email from a guy. I've been podcasting 45 days. I've done 5 episodes, and I've only got 2,000 people listening. And I'm like, what are you complaining about? So it's, or then it's the opposite. It's like, I've got 10, and you're like, well, let's talk about that a little bit. But anyway, Rob, I don't want to hog the mic here. What's your thoughts?
Well, I've always thought, and this is what's always kept me in this business of working with podcasts, is that I mean, and I definitely want to get your guys' feedback on this. I've always felt that what podcasting is doing is always at the kind of cutting edge of new media. I mean, there's so much experimentation going on right now, and there's so much unknown, but there's always there's so much new things going on with people as they think creatively about this medium. I mean, I think here recently I was a guest on the Manic Mommies podcast, and I kept thinking to myself as I was doing this show, what the heck am I doing on this show, right?
You're the first person I would have thought of for that show. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, but I thought it was really, really fascinating, because really what this medium is all about is personalities and really, really deep connections between people, and using kind of a broadcast paradigm to actually get there. And I thought it was really, really fascinating. And as I look at what big media companies are doing and small companies are doing with video in the podcasting space, I think it's really, really fascinating. Like just this last week, the Smithsonian Channel put out a video podcast series, full episode TV show called Speed Kills. And it's basically this 40-minute, there's like 3 episodes of 40-minute high quality video, basically in a topic that was really, really fascinating. And it was like, here's a cable channel that's putting out full episode TV shows in their podcast feed, and I can feature it, and users can get access to it on their mobile phones, their tablets, their, in a million different podcast apps out there. If you really think about how restricted TV content is today, I mean, I think it's like a breath of fresh air. And what's really disappointing to me is that a lot of these companies are still not putting forth the effort to monetize that, with advertising that's embedded in the actual video itself. It just feels like that there's an opportunity there that's just not being tapped. And I think it gets back to the controls from the cable companies and these new media companies that are still living in the old business models. But people want to get access to video and audio content wherever they have a device or a screen. And I think that's so important. And podcasting is really the only area that's breaking down those barriers. I don't know. So what do you guys think about all that?
Well, I think that there is a difference between video podcasting and audio podcasting. I think, Rob, you made the point in our conversation that the video podcast has suffered a little bit at the hands of YouTube.
Yep.
But I was going to say, I do think that when I go and I use my Roku, which I love my new Roku, and I bring on the app, Leo Laporte's app to it, and I get all these great podcasts. I still feel like the discoverability and the having to find interesting niche content produced by someone other than a big media company on one of these devices is still a little bit difficult. I do think, you are starting to get things like Revision 3 and some of these new media companies putting their content on devices, but it has to be on a Roku to do it, which is a little bit still techie, right? I mean, there's only 5 million Rokus in the world, in homes. Google TV is kind of a hard to use. And so I'm a kind of a tech nerd guy. I've migrated my way to Revision 3 and Twit on a Roku, but it's by and large, it's still hard to discover this content and get it to mainstream users. And I think, you pointed a little bit to it, Rob. I think it's maybe big media stranglehold a little bit on the distribution on the video side, particularly to the video screen or the big screen, which is my HDTV. Mm-hmm. But I think over time, you're going to see more and more of this kind of content make its way more easily and be more discoverable, because I don't want to necessarily be Pollyannish. I do think that there's some issues in terms of getting much more broader listenership and viewership for video podcasting and audio podcasting. And I think you're still seeing the hard work being done. But I do think there's still some hurdles like discoverability on mainstream platforms, particularly around the video podcasting side of things. I mean, getting it on your cable set-top box, I mean, good luck with that. I can get it on my Roku, but
yeah.
I probably won't be able to get on my Sky, my Dish set-top box. So, there's still some issues. Sorry, Todd, go ahead.
No, sorry for interrupting. The one thing that without giving away the thunder, I think from a set-top box standpoint, I think we see like maybe overall like maybe 2% consumption rate. That's both audio and video. We really didn't break it down separately for this upcoming report, but the one thing that we do see is that there's about 120, 130 different types of devices that are really kind of consuming our content. And when I say our content, it's a new digital media that's put on the web, whether it be on wherever your distribution point may be, whatever glass you may consume it, it's being consumed on 120, 130 devices. And we were looking at the full stack, and I'm like, well, gosh, how do I encompass the full stack? And there wasn't a way to do it, so I was doing like top 10s, but we were making entry number 10 other, and the other category, it was incredible the percentage points of people that were listening across those other 120 or other 110 devices was significant. And if you ranked it from 1 to 10, it would have been like maybe number 3. So we'll have that out on Tuesday. But the main thing people need to understand, and I think what we understand in this space, and I know that I very well do, is that my 22-year-old consumes content on her laptop and on her tablet. And my son consumes content on his Samsung smartphone. And my daughter, is hiding in her bedroom with the iPad. And it's, so it's all different content types. And the best part, and if you really think back, I remember when I was a kid, there was one TV in the house. And I lived in the country. I mean, I lived literally in the country on a dirt road. There, it was the outdoors was my entertainment vehicle. But when it came to evening TV, you watch what Dad wanted to watch. That was it. And so what that ended up being is that because you watch what Dad wanted to watch, your political, your social, economic views, a lot of that stuff was driven by Dad. And I think what you're going to find now is that my kids could care less about what I watch. They watch what they want to watch. They listen to what they want to watch. So I think what you're going to find is not only on a social level, you're going to find much more diversity in opinions in households because people are allowed to, they got all these great devices. And I think that's fantastic because my daughter brings stuff to the dinner table and says, "Did you see or did you hear?" And I'm like, "No, I didn't. Why didn't you send me a link to it?" And she'll send me a link over. And it's all about the content she's consuming and the kids are consuming, on a variety of different levels. But, I can also come back and say, you need to listen to that. And they can, whether they do or not, it's a different story. But I think it's about choice. People have choice. And I think for the first time in our history, over the past 10 years, I don't have to listen to the guy at CNN. I don't have to listen to the guy at Fox. I don't have to listen to the guy at MSNBC. I can listen to who I want to. And that's good or bad because, you've got different levels of content creators doing professional stuff out there, but at least it's my choice. And I think that's what people like. And I think worldwide people want choice. And when advertisers understand that I don't have to find their ad on Fox or whatever, they're going to come to this space in a big way. But I don't want to get dragged back into the advertising side. But Rob, what's your thoughts from what Michael was saying?
Well, I had another thought in my head. As I was thinking, I was talking to a guy. I went to a panel discussion about social media and PR, and this takes me back to another kind of a different topic here, but around social media and PR and things like that, mainly social media here, and how I think the online world is becoming more globalized. I think over the last couple of years, and Todd, you can probably confirm this too in your numbers, but it feels like podcasting and just generally the internet is reaching much more of a global market now. I mean, it just feels that way. I know that some of the podcasts that I was putting out for Zune, and this was like, over a year ago, we're getting the largest audience coming out of China. I mean, of all places. So the ranking chart was like the U.S. and I think Canada and China. And so you start seeing this globalization of this medium. And I think what's really interesting, and I hear a lot of pressure externally on the Zune platform and Windows Phone to have podcasts outside of the U.S. because currently it's just in the U.S. I just get bombarded with people wanting this content outside of the U.S. And I know that Apple and other people are already out there, but it's just it's this globalization that's happening to the web and the internet right now that is really a phenomenal impact on stuff. And then I'm also seeing an upsurge on the social media marketing side, where people are starting to realize that this is a medium that's really customized to them, and what their opportunities are. And so we may see a wave of growth around social media marketing in the podcasting space. Is kind of what I'm getting some inkling, and I'm not sure what that really means yet, and if it's a significant trend. But I think that up to this point, social media and podcasting have kind of been separate, and people haven't really brought those worlds together to synergize. But I'm getting a sense that may be changing.
Yeah, I think, and it gets back to this broader idea of, I think, democratized media. I love what you talked about there, Rob, because I do think the fact that someone can put up a podcast in the U.S. and you find fans in Asia, you find fans in Europe, and you do it quickly, I think speaks to this idea that there aren't these traditional barriers of both. I have to have a license to broadcast in country A. I need a lot of money to get up my broadcast signal. All that goes away with podcasting. And at the same time, I do think that there, at some level, this new boss is the same as the old boss, in that there are tastemakers that kind of make or break. So I think I heard mixed feelings about the strength that Apple has over the podcast market. I mean, Apple has done nothing but good things for podcasting. They've supported it, much like Microsoft. But also with Apple, with any kind of curated storefront, these are the tastemakers of today. And when you look to find a podcast, you're going to look in the top 100. And if it's there, you're going to listen to it. So it reinforces. It's much like Google search algorithms. It reinforces who's strong is just only going to get stronger. I don't mean to sound like a Debbie Downer, but I just want to kind of have that opposite perspective, in that curation and kind of people who and algorithmic reinforcement of what podcasts are already strong makes things strong. Now, that's part of the idea of quality rises to the top and cream rises to the top. I mean, that if you're on the top, you're probably good. Getting back to social media and kind of new media, kind of this democratization, I do think that people who are strong at social media ultimately are going to oftentimes find podcasting audiences. I also think that those who are strong at social media and have a following also can do things like monetize. So, there's been a lot of talk about Roman Mars over the past, couple months. He did a really impressive Kickstarter campaign. Now, he does a really high quality podcast, 99% Invisible, but he's been strong on social media. He's been kind of out there, and I think just this idea that you can fund yourself in different ways. Advertising is great, but I think people are getting really creative about how to make money. I think Kickstarter is another thing you should talk about, because if you have an audience and you have this devoted audience, which podcasts often have, someone like Roman Mars can say, "Hey, I don't necessarily want to have you pay for a subscription, but if you're one of my 1,000 true fans, why don't you chip in $10 and we'll make this thing go for another year?" So I thought that was really a cool thing that happened. I think you're going to see more of that.
One thing I've noticed here, and having been at this now since October 2004 with my own personal show,
wow,
854 episodes or something like that, and having been one of the first to have gotten an advertiser in July of 2005, and matter of fact, I brought GoDaddy into space. I brought Citrix GoToMeeting into space. So they
who was your first advertiser?
GoDaddy was
really, wow.
Yep. And then very quickly behind that, it was Citrix. We brought Citrix into space, and I'm going to tell you, those two companies,
they're still in it.
They're still in it, and they spend money, a lot of money, every quarter. And they advertise on a lot of the same shows every quarter. So someone has to ask, how can they do that? It's an advertiser just has to sit back and go, 8 years every quarter, more spending quarter after quarter. There's something that's working. But, I don't want to get into the semantics of that. But my going back to your point on different models is my show's always been ad supported. What you see in this studio, being able to keep the lights on, feed my family, ad supported. If the advertisers went away, I would very quickly have to find a job, and this is my job. But the point I want to make is I said to my audience, I've said before, I said I'd like to ramp up, I'd like to increase staff, I'd like to do more and come in at $2 a month. And since my audience has been, their teeth were broke on the advertising model. They know I'm getting a paycheck. I think it's a slippery slope because
Yeah.
they're saying, okay, you're getting advertisers and you want our money too. You make me sit through 5 minutes of ads and then you're going to ask me for $2 a month. I don't think so.
Yeah,
And
that's a great point, Todd. I think one of the things I would say is the public radio podcasts. I think those audiences have tended to be a little bit more
yeah,
accustomed to fundraising.
yep,
So we all have listened to the NPR Fund Drive, and so truth be told, Roman Mars basically has been started. He started on public radio. When I talk to guys like Adam Carolla and others about asking about tin cupping for money, some of them do it. Now, obviously, someone with Adam's audience size, he's going to get some money.
yep.
but it's funny, Adam's. I'm going to put up this podcast next week. I had my conversation with Adam Carolla, and he has grown from his show to like a network of shows.
Yep.
One of which included his dad. And he talks about how he had to have this conversation where he sat down with his dad and basically said, in his own words, listen, old man, you got to get people to pay for this thing. So he talks about how he essentially fired his dad from the podcast because he wasn't raising enough money. Now, his dad didn't necessarily want to ask for money. That was part of the issue.
Right.
But yeah, I do think there's a difference. Getting back to what you said, Todd, is, if you're a podcast that essentially hasn't been on public radio, you've kind of been risen up around advertising, I do think it's harder to then tin cup and ask for your audience to pitch in. Maybe that'll change, but I think internet audiences in general oftentimes having a harder time paying for stuff just because we've all gotten used to the stuff that's free.
And what's pretty crazy about it, if I think about it, if I'd have known from day one that the audience would be the size that it grew to, I may have had a different model because if I think about it, if I just asked for $2, if half of them gave $2, they would literally be a $3 million year. If half of the audience gave $2, so you scale that back, okay, 10% give $2, that's 300,000. That's still not a bad hunk of change for even living in Hawaii. You can believe me, you can live on that here, because I live on that here a lot less with a lot less money. So, I could hire somebody. So there is how should we say it? There are some decisions for people creating content to make when they start. And tin cupping, the folks, if you talk to Adam Curry and what he's done, he's the best when it comes to tin cupping on his No Agenda show. If you want a guy to talk to on tin cupping, he's the guy.
Yeah, at some point I'd love to talk to Adam. I will say, I'm not one of these guys who just loves crowdfunding and think anyone can do it. I do think you need an audience. And so people who oftentimes succeed at a Kickstarter campaign bring an audience to it. Right. Roman was able to bring an audience. Sometimes you have this absolutely brilliant thing that people put on Kickstarter and go, wow. And it starts to go viral. Like maybe some of these like the smartwatch that succeeded or some of these other technologies. But I will say, if you are savvy when you start a Kickstarter campaign and put out some really unique giveaways, and you have even a moderately sized audience, I think you can do some interesting things. I'm a fan of a music artist called Mike Doty, and it's not on Kickstarter, it's on another platform. But Mike started to say, hey, I'm going to rework all of Soul Coughing songs. He's the ex-lead singer of Soul Coughing, and do it in a modern format. Mike Doty had a well-known falling out with his old band, Soul Coughing. He hates those guys. He wrote all the songs. And, 15 years later, after he's gone through all this, he said, I'm going to redo these songs. I have this moderate size audience. Will you guys pitch in money? And he said, here's some of the giveaways. One of them is, I will come to your house and play music for you if you live in New York City. Or if for less money, I will play a private session for you on video Skype. And I was looking at it yesterday. He's already far exceeded his goal just because he's given all these really cool giveaways away. Now, most of us aren't Mike Doty. Maybe, we can't necessarily give a private concert or whatever, but even if you have an audience of 1,000 fans and you could bring some really interesting value to them and like something very unique, I think you could do stuff with things like crowdfunding.
Yeah, I think so too. I saw someone that has actually crowdfunded a pinball podcast thing that they're going to do some pinball world of fame or something. They raised like 40 grand in just like 5 days. So pinball, that is a niche audience. And but they did, and I looked at their giveaways, and they did some, like you said, they did some really cool stuff. And there's like some luminaries in the pinball space, and they got the guy to sign, autographs and pictures and, private time at this pinball museum. And so
it's about passion communities, right? I mean, there are these deep passion communities, and like 999 people out of 1,000 don't necessarily care that deeply about pinball,
right.
But that 1,000th person will pay for that luminary signature, right?
That's right. And they paid large. Go ahead, Rob.
One thing that I worry about as I think about Kickstarter is this phenomenon of the Kickstarter kind of, is it a long-term trend, or is it something that it could easily fall apart because of maybe one or two big fraudulent Kickstarter campaigns that could kill that market? I just wonder if, and I think that some people can really get away with, I think, raising money that way, but they really have to deliver, right? And I think that's the big challenge. I'm not sure that anyone can actually tap into that and actually be able to pull it off.
I've looked a lot at crowdfunding and Kickstarter, and I think, even Kickstarter recognizes that once they try to become an electronic store or like a place to get like cool new gadgets, there's an issue there. So they've actually kind of tried to pull that back a little bit, because I think part of the issue, if a tech company looks to go to Kickstarter for their funding as opposed to like a venture capitalist, we all know that there's oftentimes huge failure rates when you're producing a piece of hardware, for example. And you've already seen some fairly substantial delays in delivery of some of these hardware products. So I think it's definitely, you got a good point there, Rob. It's definitely more iffy around particularly things like hardware, because oftentimes that needs to bring in manufacturing. Maybe there's a semiconductor, maybe there's software that needs to be put in. I think if it's something like artistic, I think you probably won't see as much of a backlash around artistic efforts, because, if it's someone like a Mike Doty or like a musician or someone who's putting on a play, if you can raise your funding, you could probably do this piece of artistic work and give out some of the goodies. It's not like bringing a piece of a gaming console to market. So, but I do think there's real issues around, and you're starting to see people concerned about crowdfunding, particularly around hardware products. And I think it becomes even, and not to go too much down this crowdfunding path, many people may not know, but there is a new initiative. The Jobs Act approved last year basically is going to allow people to sell equity through crowdfunding. And I think that's going to become really iffy. If you're a company, say you want to sell part of your company, like sell stock in your company, and people crowdfund, there's going to be a lot of people who may be ultimately very disappointed because you are not delivering what you said you're going to deliver.
In the chat room, someone says, I've been kicking around an idea where content producers would offer apps which might be related to their content. The apps would be available on a subscription basis through an in-app purchase. For example, one of the apps I'm working on today is called Fanats, which would allow users to find out where other listeners are at. For example, where other GNC / the new media show fans at that would be, and he ran out of. So I think the app stuff is smart, but I think it's a tool. Believe it or not, we don't see a lot of people using individual apps, individual show apps. I'm just wait till we finish this typing the rest of his sentence here, but I don't know.
It's funny. I think that there is something to be said for long shelf life versus short shelf life content. And I think that Mark Maron has done some interesting things around creating premium apps and putting part of his large archive behind essentially what is a paywall with an app. And I think he can do that because you want to, if you're a fan of Mark Maron, you want to hear him talk to Gallagher. You want to hear him talk to Robin Williams, because that stuff never gets old. It's evergreen. I think it's a little bit harder for tech podcast because it is so time sensitive.
Yep.
I think Dan Benjamin made the point. No one wants to hear about the iPhone that was stolen 3 years ago. But he says, and one of the things he said is his podcast he did on attention deficit disorder with Merlin Mann. That thing is always being downloaded because it's such an evergreen topic. So there's an example of one podcaster who has a couple different types of podcasts. One is continuing to be downloaded years after it's done. Then there's another one is just a short shelf life product that, its buy date is expired and no one cares about it. So I think it depends on the type of content, whether or not you can ask people to pay for your archive. If it's like, for example, behind a paywall with an app, which Marin has done.
That actually reminds me, we probably should do a piece on the stats on long shelf life shows too, because, I always laugh because I'll get an email from someone and I'll be like, oh, I've got really great evergreen content. And, here's the slope. And let me start out by this is when the show's launched. It goes up, and 99.5% of shows, the slope goes up and it just drops. That's the consumption rate. There's very few shows that start up and then come down a little bit and then go straight across. There's such few shows that have evergreen, and those that do great evergreen content keep doing it, because those ultimately, I think, the guys that are going to get will make the most money over the long term, especially if they can learn how to repackage their shows at a later date. But the evergreen stuff is so few, but yet so valuable.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it depends again. I think tech news centric and news centric people in general are it's just a little bit shorter shelf life.
Yeah, 7 days.
I was talking to the CEO of Earwolf, and like he said, the vast majority of his downloads in a month is actually the catalog versus the new stuff, because that stuff just, if you have a conversation with a comedian, people want to hear that because the jokes don't get old.
Yep. Rob, you were trying to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that the whole thing with the long kind of term content, I think is a really good point, because back in the earlier days, with my own show that I did for many years, I actually combined kind of tech news topics at the beginning of the show, and then I had longer form stuff around conversations with authors and leading experts on a variety of different topics, and I would actually put those out as separate content, and I got so much traffic from people over the long term just coming in and wanting to listen to that conversation about some aspect of the future of search or something that actually had a longer term kind of shelf life. And then we took that conversation and basically transcribed it and created articles about it and got them out into newspapers, and then actually linked to the audio of that as part of those articles on the website. And then so you have this kind of cross promotional opportunity that also exists around that type of content. You look at the Quick and Dirty Tips podcast kind of network, and they have a very, very similar type of situation there too, where you're going in there and you're learning stuff, and those topics are applicable over years, and you could turn that into a book, or you can turn it into all sorts of other types of media to monetize. So podcast becomes kind of the foundation for a media kind of media company, media property.
I want to go back. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Todd.
I wanted to go back a little bit and talk about, Apple's our worst best friend, because, I think the numbers that we show on Tuesday will not surprise people in some aspects when how influential Apple is in the space. But, what is it going to take? Is it going to take Apple producing an Apple TV with a menuing system that allows the Revision 3 and the Twit and the TPN and the stuff from Libsyn and the variety of different networks that have content? Is it going to take them to put something in that it will be in a linear format that you can, just press the down button on the remote controller? What's it going to take then from a catalog? Because really this is what this is. It's about a catalog issue, about getting the catalog distributed. We're able to get on all this glass, but ultimately the discovery still sucks. So how do we increase that discovery rate and make it more, I guess for a better word, mainstream, or like the major networks do? How do we do that?
Well, I don't necessarily want to limit it to Apple. I mean, and not to
Me neither.
not to give Rob a plug, but I will. I mean, I think Microsoft coming out with this new Xbox, for example. I think user interfaces are getting better. I think that there's so much being done that's interesting around discovery right now. I think that I don't know if I would rely on the TV screen as the way to kind of get audio. Maybe you're specifically talking about video podcasts. I think that discovery is going to be a huge part of the equation for video podcasts. Part of the issue is the monetization there. Do they have a deal with Time Warner? Do they have a deal with Disney? Those deals that we as consumers don't know about actually have a huge impact on what we ultimately see and consume, because these things are being promoted and subconsciously we know we want to watch the latest HBO show because there's huge promotion dollars behind it. There's not necessarily a lot of huge promotion dollars behind Leo shows because, Leo runs the Lean network. He's not wasting his money on advertising. So I think part of the issue is, quite honestly, there's just not a lot of promotion dollars behind these things. But I think over time, maybe as guys, Mark Maron has a new show on IFC. Maybe he'll strike a deal that says, hey, I want you to push my podcast out on your new connected device. As these pioneers that are developing shows both on audio and video podcasts make their way into mainstream platforms on like you said, the big glass, maybe they'll strike deals that actually negotiate. So you have to also promote my podcast, because this is maybe as Jesse Thorne and the guys from the Nerdist, these guys are all getting discovered. They're going to TV. Maybe these guys will say, hey, I want you to now push my podcast through your and advertise it on your radio broadcast network. It's going to be a combination of all these things, I think, that's going to bring it to the forefront more and more.
Well, that's exactly what Chris from the Nerdist is doing. He's, but you have to look at some of these guys too and realize that a lot of these guys came from big media and went to podcasting, built a big following, and then are now going back to big media again. So you have this kind of this circle that lots of these guys are doing. Kevin Smith has done it. Chris Hardwick. There's got to be. I can't think of any others right off the top of my head, but I think that there is this kind of cycle that's happening where guys that were talented in the broadcast medium that maybe went out of favor or something like that because they were too early to the game or something, were too kind of niche or nerdy or whatever, that kind of got
revived their careers. And it's funny because it's almost like if you were to make it a VH1 episode, it's the same plot line, right? It's riches to rags to riches. I think you've seen it with Mark Maron. You've seen it with Adam Carolla. These guys are in huge demand because they said, fine, if corporate media doesn't want me, I'll go to democratized media. And then all of a sudden they've rebuilt their audiences and corporate media is knocking on the door again. And I think that's a really interesting plot line. So, I mean, if you did the movie about it, it'd be the same plot for about 100 of these movies. But it's a really interesting trend, Ryan.
I think one thing, too, is from the audio standpoint, people are always I love video, but, the money's the money's in the audio because you can make money with the audio. And it's very hard to make enough, to pay just the basic bills with video to make it work. But, groups like Stitcher and so forth that are bringing apps to the car help a lot. So I think, the discovery standpoint, it will take time. And we've always I think we got the distribution down. That's a no-brainer. I think the next step is to work on getting the discovery and building. I want the entire United States population, tuning into whatever show they want on a weekly or daily basis. And obviously that's a big dream, but it has potential to happen over time. But just like anything else, we all want it to move a lot faster. Rob, you had sent me over a link to a website, and let me bring this up. It's called Mimoto. I guess that's the Mimoto life logging experience. What's the story on this?
Oh, Robert Scoble shared this, and I guess he's placed an order for it. And it's not entirely kind of a new media topic, but in some ways it is. It's this movement that's happening around kind of wearable computing and this trend. What this particular device is, and it hasn't been released yet. It's about $279, but it basically clips to, like some part of your clothing or something like that. And it will take a photograph every 30 seconds of what's in front of you. And it will catalog that, and once it gets synchronized up to an app or something like that, it'll stitch it together into like your life journey for a day, and it will plot this. So it's kind of an interesting thing if you think about this device and you think about the whole Google Glass with the ability to record video and take pictures, how this is, I think, going to be a fascinating trend going forward is people's ability to record and take photographs, create media based on the same kind of viewpoint that we all have every day of looking through our eyes, right? Or looking at people, and what the impact of this media creation could be on privacy. I mean, this little $279 device that you can clip on your clothing has sensors in it, like your GPS location. It has a sensor that plots your lateral and vertical view, and it gets at a level of detail that is really, really kind of fascinating if you think about where computing is going and where our media is going. Is that every aspect of all of our lives, and I think with the recent bombings in Boston and now the pressure to get more video cameras out in the world recording what everybody does. I mean, you can totally see how our world, there isn't going to be any privacy anymore. And I know this show isn't about this topic, but it does hark back to our conversation around what's happening in new media and what's happening in photography and video, and how our world is changing. And I think, I'm not sure that all of us realize what the implications of this could be.
I'll be honest with you, there's got to be a pause button on this thing somewhere, because I don't want this thing taking a picture every 30 seconds. First of all, it's not coming in my house. My wife would, it's not happening. If you're a single guy, this might work out, but this is definitely
the scary thing is when it becomes embedded in my my eyeglasses, and it becomes so miniaturized on Google Glasses 3.0, you don't even see it. It's like it's coming in your house whether you know it or not. That's the scary part.
And I was one of the lucky ones that got on Glass, and I'll be, having to go to San Francisco or LA here in the near future to pick up my glasses. But so I'm sure that this will become a topic here in my household too. When I'm wearing around, my wife will be like, "Are you recording? Are you taking pictures?" So it's going to get a little weirded out, but yeah, kind of an interesting device. $279, orange, black, or white. 2,000 pictures a day. Okay. So you're standing at the urinal, or you're in the bathroom, or you're in. Okay.
Be careful where you look.
Yeah,
is the thing. Right?
That's a fact. I could see this thing getting very, very ugly.
Todd, I'm looking forward to hearing your impressions of Google Glass. I think Scoble did a post today, or I saw a bunch of people tweeting saying that he said he's never going to be without this again. And I thought, well, what do you expect Robert Scoble to stay? I mean, it just seemed to me that that's exactly what I would expect him to say.
Yeah, and that to me is like way overdrawn hype. I'm sorry, it's
well, guys, keep in mind with
Robert.
Robert, he's actually in the process of writing a book on context, and so of course he's going to be all over this because this is about kind of this new change that's happening to our mobile technology, is that it is becoming more about context. And of course he's going to be a big fan of it because he can geek out on it, and he's clearly over the privacy line. He's been over the privacy line for 5 or 6 years now. I've known Robert for a long time. and he just doesn't care. I mean, he'll put out every piece of information about his life out there. You just wait. I mean, this is just the beginning.
And as the chairman of Google, Eric Schmidt, said, is that, society is afraid of change, but society will adapt. And I think it's true. They will.
I think Chris Pirillo, who you guys had last week, would be a great Google Glass candidate because, he's vlogging his life. I mean, if you could tie your vlog to your Google Glass, I mean, that's, or this Memento or whatever it is, it's the perfect utility or tool to do it with. I think for some people, it's just going to be exactly what the doctor ordered. For others, we might want to, like you said, Todd, to have the off button, especially if it's coming into our house.
That's right. It's not going to be a POV camera when I'm having private time with my wife. No, it's but that's the industry that's going to grab this thing. It's going to be crazy.
Well, I think that there's two parts to this, right? There's the part of, like Chris wants to record himself, so he's always holding the camera out in front of him like this. He wants to be the star, right?
Right.
But Google Glass and this new device that we've been talking about here is about taking pictures of other people and other things around us. So you have this kind of this push and pull. I think that there's still going to be this huge explosion around recording ourselves and putting ourselves out there, but also forcing other people to be in our media as well.
And we talk a lot about the downside of no privacy, but I do think there's a couple upsides, right? I mean, I think that when everything's being recorded, when you're an a-hole, it's most likely going to be on camera if you're in public.
Yep.
And when there's more serious things like terrorist events, I mean, there's a good chance that might ultimately be being recorded, even if it's not like a security camera. And also, I mean, you guys, if you use Vine, I actually am an Android guy, so I haven't been able to use it as much as I want because I borrowed my friend's iPhones. But Vine is a great tool, right? You can create really interesting, kind of very quick, short videos. I imagine that there could be a creative explosion, potentially even tied to things like Google Glass. There might be some really interesting things you do once there's interesting software around, what you can look at. And I'm not maybe smart enough to figure out what that could be, but I think there might be some really interesting creative expression as well.
I get pretty lucky. I travel a lot, and I get to hang out with a lot of cool people. And they're not the types that will like sit down for an interview, but some of my consulting stuff, I work with some big egghead scientists, and just all kinds of different folks in life. And I've thought that when I put my application in for if I had Glass, so that I would, do this travel. The goal would be is to, with the person's permission, of course, to be able to, just kind of have these conversations and not necessarily. It's more of a way to bring someone at ease, and I don't know if anyone can be at ease when you're wearing these glasses or not. But my goal with my show has always been that when I'm doing my tech show, is that it's like we're having a conversation at the dinner table. We're having this back and forth about what's going on in the world, and I thought it would be really cool to be able to take that outside of the tech space and with Glass, being able to have these interactions with cool people and show people cool places and, just the dumb little things that happen in life. Now, is it going to be Justin TV all over again? I don't know, but I don't want it to be Justin TV. I want it to be like this cool, because you're going to talk with someone and the 90% of what they say is going to be boring as hell, but it's that 1 minute and 30 seconds or 2 minutes of like, oh my goodness, did it, let me remember what this guy just said, that are going to be the things that are going to be, I think, where Google Glass is going to have capture moments of genius.
Yeah. I think that we're all kind of oversaturated with social sharing, though. I mean, we all seen everyone's Facebook pictures a million times and Instagram, and like, we're all kind of getting like, okay, I've seen this enough. I actually think that the groundbreaking disruption with Google Glass is how it's going to overlay. It's really going to be the first true augmented reality device that's going to make a difference, right? So as you're walking around, it's literally, you guys are old enough. You're old. I have a little gray like you. We all remember the Bionic Man. So I mean, remember how cool it was when Steve Austin would be looking around and he'd see like the thing just kind of glob onto this guy who weighs 185 pounds. He's got a gun under his but I mean, it truly is going to be one of those augmented reality things that I think could be really cool. You can walk around, figure out where the restaurants are. You can maybe identify people. It could have great security applications if it was put on like by maybe airports personnel maybe they can actually. Well, actually, there's security concerns there, right, as well. But I think augmented reality is the big potential application here.
Michael,
well, then it must have the ability to record in slow-mo then, right?
Yeah.
So Michael, you said you're an Android user. Are you playing Ingress?
Am I playing, what is it?
It's called Ingress. Are you playing the Google game Ingress?
You know what? My kids play way more games than I do. I don't play a lot of Android app games.
If you get out and about, it's an actual virtual. It's a real world game where you're out and about. So check it out sometime. I think you'll have a lot of fun.
I will.
And I love doing it with my kids. Hey, just I know we're at about an hour 5. I want to take just a minute. Do you guys see what Adam Curry produced? He's building this new box called the Podcaster. Have you guys seen this thing? It's he just got frustrated with the tools out there. So, now I think Adam's going into the hardware business.
Well, Todd, you kind of went through this same kind of mental exercise, didn't you?
Yeah.
Around your own video box.
I did. And actually, let me bring us back to center because, I was having, trouble with doing a mobile show. Let's see if I can find it here. So
is it a podcast in a box? Like it's like a mobile podcast machine?
Yeah, it's an audio machine. So this is what Adam's built. And then if you look at what I built, my thing is just this huge monster.
It's the suitcase version of the iPhone.
Well, it's a 4-camera live studio is what it is.
Yeah.
And it's 50 pounds of gear I lug behind me. So I told Adam, I said, put me down for one,
Yeah.
He does strictly audio. So he didn't have to worry about
Is he actually planning to commercialize it? Like he's going to sell this thing? Like
he's going to do a Kickstarter, I think. And
he's the kind of guy that could do it because he has that dedicated, huge, passionate follower.
Yeah. He says it's going to be $400 or $500. I said, I want one. Just put me down. I'm already in, so. Because
here's the thing, though. I mean, he has a huge audience, but how many people are podcasting? A lot of them might just be passive listeners.
But I think he's got enough of the podcasting crowd listening to him that I think we'll see what happens with this.
Well, oftentimes, Todd, and I'm sure this was your inspiration too, and I think about this stuff all the time too. I'm always thinking about, well, how can I record my show or record a show in a much more simple and cost-effective and compact way, right? So it takes up less space, so I can do it anywhere. And you're always coming up with these solutions on how you can combine hardware and stuff. I mean, my brain works that way too, and I think a true geek kind of
and it's definitely
that's common.
It's definitely a geek thing too, So, but on a more somber note, we talked with Chris last week about YouTube and making money on YouTube, but over on Ad Age, they announced that YouTube has done price drops for upfront packages to lower TV dollars. So they're lowering their CPM rates and lowering their, basically, this is how much you got to spend to get into the YouTube marketplace. So it makes me wonder, okay, so people are already complaining about not making enough money, but now YouTube's going to lower the barrier for companies to get in. They're trying to get the TV dollars, but at the same point, you can only split the cash cow so many times before, the agency takes their cut, YouTube takes their cut, and then the content creator ends up with a little bit. It's, boy, you can only cut that cash so many times.
It's I don't want to dwell on YouTube too much. I thought the most interesting tech news this week was the fact that the rumors that Amazon's going to come out with its own video set-top box. And, you package that with the idea that Amazon had I don't know how many people know Amazon has a studios where they've actually started to get their own web series built.
Yep.
And now they're starting to put those out on Amazon Prime on Xbox, for example. I think that the potential with what Amazon can do. Now, a lot of people complain about Amazon in the ebook world because particularly people that are in love with traditional publishing, mainly because it's killing publishers. But if Amazon were to say, I want to embrace video and audio producers and put this content online and give them a democratized platform, like, Kindle really is a turnkey publishing platform. If you want to publish your ebook, you can do it in a day. I think Amazon could have a place to play, maybe in online video on the TV and maybe even audio.
Well, it's interesting because about the time the rumors of the Amazon set-top box came out, I got an email from Amazon asking to sign an NDA, and maybe I'm violating.
There you go.
Maybe I'm
You're here first, Todd. You're going to be one of their premium broadcasters. I was
going to say, what's the story on that, Todd?
Maybe I'm violating the NDA, saying I was asked to sign the NDA.
You just did. You're going to jail.
No, I can't say, but I will. It's what I sent Of course, I had to sign for Raw Voice. I didn't sign for me. I signed for the company, and I sent the information over to Angelo, and I said, what do you think about this? And the first thing he replied back to me says, where does this fit in our priorities? And so anyway, we have to have a discussion about that. But I don't know. We'll see if they come out with a set-top box.
Well, here's the thing. I think Amazon, wherever there's a growing, fast-growing digital media market, they want in. I mean, yeah. They got into music. They were a fast follower at Apple. They got into, they weren't the first one with ebooks. They followed other guys, but they killed it. They're getting into video. If podcasting is really growing, and maybe there's going to be another knee in the curve, who's to say Amazon won't want in?
Yeah, and but I still think, that video, it has to be really good, for people to sit and watch and take their time to watch. It has to be really highly produced. Audio, well, they can listen on the treadmill, so it's opportunity listening.
Yeah, I think
Amazon always has a curated section, though. They're going to curate here's what you should watch, here's what you should listen to. Then there's going to be the masses trying to get into that curated section. Sorry, Rob, I interrupted you there.
No, that's fine. One of the other things that I think was discussed last week about them also is the opportunity for them around advertising. And if you combine that with their discussion about creating a like a Roku type of video playing platform, then I think you can start to see how this whole bigger picture might work for them. I mean, if you look at Amazon up to this point, the only places where I've seen advertising per se has been on their Kindle devices. So they have been inclined to get involved in advertising on their devices up to this point. So maybe that's kind of an Uber direction that they're going, in a change that could translate over to advertising in around audio and video content too, on kind of a new expanded platform for them. And I also know that Amazon has very, very loyal users, right? And though I know that a lot of them are probably involved in the Apple platform and Android as well, but I do know that there's millions of people out there that would probably buy any kind of device that comes out of that company, and it will be a significant player in the market.
Well, here's where they're smart, right? What they're going to do is say, hey, if you're an Amazon Prime customer, we'll give you a free Amazon set-top box. We'll send it to your home, and you can watch all these Amazon web series for free. So I think their huge competitive weapon is their huge database of e-commerce subscribers. I mean, we started buying food off of Amazon on a subscription, which is kind of insane. It's like, okay, you're going to send me nutrition bars every 2 weeks, and you're billing my credit card, and it's kind of stupid that I'm doing this, but it's actually kind of brilliant on their part. They're just kind of wicked smart in these crafty ways that we don't necessarily think about. And I think one of them is leveraging their huge Amazon Prime customer base and saying, hey, let's bring all these guys in, give them free videos, and just convert that audience.
Well, living here in Hawaii, the cost of shipping is incredible. It almost offsets being able to go into a local merchant and buy something. So, I don't have time to run down to a big box or to Best Buy or whatever. If I need something, I go on Amazon, and I'll pay a few bucks more if the guy's a Prime user because I can get it shipped to Hawaii for free. And it may take a few more days, but it still saves me a bunch of money, and it's fantastic. So, from my perspective, it probably gives vendors another incentive to be a Prime vendor, because number one, they're only going to be promoting probably vendors on there that are Prime. I would imagine maybe not, but I've saved thousands of dollars in shipping costs by being a Prime member, and I'm sure those Prime guys hate Hawaii customers because their cost to ship is still the same. They just make it up in the margins with the lower 48. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where they come in on the space. They definitely know our buying habits for sure.
Yep.
Hey, as we're getting ready to wrap up here the show today, because we're fast approaching an hour 15, I don't want to go really much more over that. Michael, tell me a little bit more about what you're doing over at New Market, and what's the plan there?
Yeah. So, as I said, I'm an analyst, and I started my own company, Next Market, and it's nextmarket.co. I write about emerging consumer markets. I write about online video. I write about ebooks, and I've been writing about podcasts because I think it's an interesting market that's changing. And so, I will work with clients and I'll consult with technology companies. But I've started this series of podcasts. And one of the big projects I've done is called the Podcast Project. If you guys want to hear me talk to Rob Greenlee, Rob was great, and we had a long conversation. Rob, if you want to hear me talk to Stephen Dubner, Adam Carolla, or Ira Glass, or other guys, just go to nextmarket.co or look up the Next Market podcast on the Zune catalog, iTunes, or SoundCloud or Stitcher. But yeah, I'm sorry. Did I go too soon in the pitch?
No, not at all. So, I think this is great. We need more guys like you that are out there digging in and finding out really, this is kind of the goal of this show too, is to find out what's going on, what people are doing different. Can I ask
you a question, Todd,
sure,
real quickly in your data? And if you haven't dug into this, one of the things I thought was interesting is the length of show and how that impacts listenership. It seems like a lot of people like shorter, quick shows. Maybe there's people that like long shows, but I'd love your perspective on what you think on length of show.
I don't know if I have anything on the data side, and that's a good, analytics point to pull, because we definitely can do that because we have show lengths compared to audience sizes. So that would be relatively easy to pull out of the metrics. Here's my personal thought on it. If you're engaged, you got great content, they'll stay and listen. If you get boring, they're going to leave. Survey data that we've pulled throughout the years, and this has been really since day one. And this is, a big question I get asked by advertisers all the time. How do I know that they're listening to the ad? How do I know they've downloaded it? How do I know that they actually listen? So what we've done is we went out and we did huge surveys with the audience and says, how much of the show are you listening to? And what we find on average is that audiences will listen to 85 to 90% of a show on a regular basis of the shows that they're subscribed to. And the average person is probably subscribed to 5 to 7 shows, but they listen. They have opted in to listen to that show, and they want to hear what that person says. So 85 to 90% of the content is where they listen, irregardless of content length.
Average is 7 shows. Rob told me in our conversation he subscribes to 70 shows. So I think, Rob, either it's a sickness or you work in the podcast industry. It's one of those two.
Yeah, I don't think I'm probably a typical podcast listener now.
Well, I do 50 a week, and basically I just
do you listen to 50 a week? Or
well,
you produce?
I sample 50 a week.
Okay,
and I basically what I'll do is I listen for 10 minutes. If you don't capture me in 10 minutes, because what I'm really looking for is from my business, I'm looking at who's the talent, where's the talent at, and where's and basically, you can pretty much get a feel for a show in about 10 minutes because you get through their chit chat, and usually you kind of start getting into some content, and you can tell their flow and if they've got a process. Usually about 10 minutes. Sometimes I'll listen a little longer, sometimes a little less. The ones that are a little less, I can almost invariably go to the stats and see that why I'm listening a little bit less. But I think 85, 90% of listening is for the amount of the show is good no matter what. This show here, again, I think hour 15 is about as much as we dare stretch it, and probably sometimes we should go a little shorter, but I don't know why. Hour 15 seems to be a magic number.
But well, Rob, I think that putting more data out there is great. I think returning to kind of the podcast project I did, one of the reasons I did it was I didn't feel like there's enough information about the podcast market. And I do think providing more data out there, letting people see what's going on around what people are listening to, et cetera, is beneficial for the industry. So I applaud that you're doing that, because I think we need more of that.
Yeah, and it's, we had originally thought maybe we would sell the data, and I said it's just better for us just to put the data out and do it periodically. And I think we're going to do it once a month, put out a new report every month, and we're going to cover different facets each time. This one that we're going to put on Tuesday is largely centered around how they're consuming. That's the how and where they're consuming the content. We may do the next one maybe geographical or something like that. But the first one is how and where, and where the stuff ranks out on, and where people are getting the content. I think there's some good data there. And, it's just our data, but it's also approximately 15,000 shows and 69 million listeners. So I think it's a pretty good sample rate.
That's a great audience.
Yeah. All right, guys. Hey, Rob, we got a new email address, don't we?
Ooh, we do?
Yeah, you're
That's right, we do. Yeah. I haven't actually got it set up yet, but
it'll accept. It's Rob at New Media Show. I'm Todd at New Media Show. So you can fire your emails to us there. We do have what's on the lineup for next week. Who do we have on? Who's currently scheduled for next week, Rob?
Let me pull it up here. I've got Paul Colligan, who wrote a book on YouTube.
So Paul will be on, and Paul is, I'm sure we're going to hear about affiliate marketing a little bit. Paul is a master in that as well. Yep. So we'll talk with Paul next week. Should be fun having him on. Just a programming note for you, Rob. I did have a trip come up. If you look at the May 25th schedule, we may want to push that one to Sunday, just from a programming standpoint. I hope that doesn't totally screw you up. But
so move it to May 26th.
Yeah, move it to May 26th to the Sunday if you can.
Okay.
So other than that, hey, Michael, thanks for taking time out of your Saturday. I know it's hard to get people on. Everyone's busy, but excited about what you guys are doing, or what you're doing at nextmarket.co.
.co, yeah. Hey, and Todd, I've been a fan of Blueberry. I use that plugin, and you guys do a great job there. And I want to thank you for having me on your show. And anytime you want me back, I can talk tech.
Absolutely.
I'm a nerd, so.
Yeah, fantastic. And we'll just keep those Forbes article rolling. We need about one of those a week. How about this? I'll write up your data. When you send me some of that data, I think I could do a post on for you. Yeah, I'll get you the when we're finished up with it on Monday. I'll send it to you pre-release.
I'm an analyst. I love the numbers. I'll write them up.
Yeah, and actually, I'll send you the down and dirty spreadsheets. You can dig down and even deeper.
I'll make charts.
Yeah,
pretty charts.
Yeah. I've seen a recent surge in articles online about podcasts, and like the top 15 in a particular genre, and just a lot more kind of buzz around the medium here over the last, couple months. And it's really, really positive to see that the interest is starting to pick up again from a media perspective. And I know your article was one that kind of spikes the interest, I think, in this space, and gets people talking about it in the kind of social media space.
Yeah, and I know we're going along, Todd. I will say that it was one of the cool things about that article is other people have reached out to me, said let's chat about the podcast market. So, like I said, I've talked to the CEO of Earwolf, Jeff over there. So I have a few more of these interesting conversations. So stay tuned, guys. I'll have more podcasts coming out on the podcast market.
And I think too is what really it boils down to, and I want my biggest challenge is making the public understand that it's not about the process anymore. It's about the consumption. It's about the content. And podcast is a word, and it's a type of content that's being delivered a certain way, but ultimately you can still go to a website, click play, or stream it via your phone, or the ways to get it are so numerous. It's not about downloading the show. People still do that, but largely people are just clicking play and using their existing internet connection, and that's the beauty of having LTE and 4G and all that stuff that's made.
I like to call it friction-free media. I mean,
there you go.
Once you reduce the friction, it just increases the listening ship.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Hey, thanks, guys. And everyone, again, send us an email here, Todd at New Media Show and Rob at New Media Show. If you got comments or suggestions for guests, we're always looking for a great guest to bring on as well. Until next time, we'll see you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Okay.
And
bye.
Aloha.